The Van Halen group, which was started in the 1970s, produced some of the most well-known hits of the era and was a major influence in rock music. Eddie Van Halen and his brother Alex were the band's leaders, nurturing it until internal conflicts started to rip them apart. There was conflict within the group as a result of Eddie's desire for greater authority over its finances and operations. Eddie's personal struggles fueled the drama that dominated the group at the time. Although the Van Halen group's influence on rock music cannot be denied, the group's personal disputes and psychological struggles continued to be a major problem. Eddie Van Halen, born in Amsterdam, Netherlands, on January 26, 1955, he was a very successful rock musician who rose to recognition thanks to his inventive guitar playing and technical prowess. The band Van Halen sold more than 80 million albums worldwide during the 1970s and 1980s. For their debut album, Van Halen's distinctive sound, especially the two-handed tapping technique, became a trademark. But in the 1980s and 1990s, Eddie's relationship with his bassist, Michael Anthony, became more strained. One of the band's mainstays, Anthony was renowned for his distinctive backup vocals and strong bass tones. But when Anthony joined Wolfgang, which later replaced him with the Heat, things became more tense. Anthony claimed that as the band progressed, Eddie and his brother Alex Van Halen became increasingly authoritarian, forcing him to quit. In the early 2000s, a new problem arose between Eddie and Fred Durst, the lead singer of Limp Bizkit. Following the departure of West Borland's guitarist, Eddie was thinking about joining forces with Durst. But the unofficial jam session at Durst's house soon deteriorated since Eddie did not fit in with the audience or the vibe. Eddie, who is renowned for his professionalism and quiet demeanor, took issue at the unprofessional environment and departed the jam session without warning. Since Eddie's combative reaction was viewed as an affront to the craft of music, this incident sparked an iconic feud in rock circles. Eddie also had problems with Noel Monk, their former manager. Despite having a tumultuous past with Eddie Van Halen and the band, Monk was instrumental in leading them through their ascent to stardom. In the middle of internal strife, financial disputes, and the demands of success, tensions rose. During the perplexing lifestyle of rock celebrity, Monk played a crucial role in keeping the band together, landing big deals, and guiding it through its early years. Among the many difficulties and disputes that characterized Eddie Van Halen's career were his relationship with his previous manager, Noel Monk, and his relationship with his bassist, Michael Anthony. The band's legacy and the global influence of their music have been molded by these problems. The band's internal dynamics started to shift in the middle of the 1980s, especially when Eddie Van Halen became increasingly dissatisfied with the band's management. There was a lot of conflict because of Due Time's management approach regarding the band's finances and operations, and Eddie and his brother Alex believed that Monk was neglecting their business issues, including the band's finances and profit sharing. Monk's position was further undermined when he became entangled in the escalating conflict between Eddie and lead vocalist David Lee Roth. Monk, who would later assert in his 2017 book Running with the Devil that the band became more difficult to manage because of drug usage, said that being asked to manage Van Halen in 1985 was the last straw. Disagreements and egos. He observed that Eddie's obsession with his music and his reclusive nature clashed. Roth's dramatic personality frequently contributed to the dysfunction that developed inside the band, and he reportedly felt deceived by Monk's management of the group's affairs, which prompted the decision to sever relations. The men's animosity for one another has ruined Eddie and Monk's relationship. To put it mildly, Eddie's concerns about Randy Rhoads' talent were a major contributing factor in the tense situation with Rhoads. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, both guitarists became well known. Their approaches were frequently contrasted through Van Halen and Rhoads, as well as his role as guitarist in Ozzy Osbourne's band. According to reports, Eddie's competitive nature was the primary cause of his personal road trouble. Although he was a devotee of Eddie's music, RHS blazed his own trail, and despite Rhoads' admiration, his guitar playing with Ozzy blended classical aspects to the more severe hard rock. It was reported that Eddie had made disparaging remarks about Rhoads in private, saying the guitarist was a copycat who lacked the artistry of Eddie. In interviews, Eddie was just as contemptuous of RHS, which stood in contrast to Rhoads' deference to Eddie. The fact that both guitarists were regarded as pioneers of a new wave of rock guitar added to the tension, and Eddie may have become even more frustrated with the incessant inquiries from both fans and reviewers about who was the superior guitarist. Eddie persisted in disparaging Rhoads' talent after RHS, whose career was cut short by a catastrophic plane disaster in 1982, passed away. Eddie's competitive personality and sensitivity to comparison with other guitarists, particularly those who admire Rads, who would have challenged him in creativity and skill, were highlighted by the friction between the two artists. Hagar's dramatic departure from Van Halen in 1996 marked the breaking point. While Hagar briefly rejoined the band in 2004, there was public controversy over whether he was fired or quit, and both sides voiced resentment toward one another. Since then, the relationship has remained tense. Some have called Eddie's time with Van Halen toxic, while others have called him challenging to collaborate with. Their differing perspectives on music defined Eddie Van Halen's interactions with Rush members. Despite being popular rock bands in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Van Halen and Rush had quite different musical ideas. Eddie's guitar style was more admired for its intricate compositions and technical prowess, whilst Van Halen was recognized for his extravagant stage presence. Although Eddie was impressed with Rush's abilities, especially Alex Lyon, he was annoyed by their rigid and regulated approach to music. During one of Van Halen's late 1970s tours, Eddie and Rush had a notorious backstage encounter that brought to light Eddie's developing disenchantment with aspects of the music industry that did not fit his vision. This represented Eddie's battle to strike a balance between his artistic expression and perfectionism in contrast to other successful bands' different strategies. Eddie also battled serious internal issues, such as addiction. He really embraced the drug and alcohol-fueled way of life that was popular in the 1970s and 1980s. Early in his career, he started drinking to cope with social anxiety and stage fright. This led to frequent drinking and drug usage on and off stage. His work was hampered by this addiction, which also led to health issues and strained personal relationships. Wolfgang Van Halen, Eddie's adolescent son, was instrumental in helping him kick his addiction in the early 2000s. Wolfgang promised to be a better parent and role model for his son when he joined Van Halen in 2006, giving Eddie's life a new purpose. In his last years, Eddie discovered stability and focus while receiving treatment from Wolfgang. This father-son bond persisted till Eddie passed away in 2020. So viewers, for the next update please subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.